Hello and welcome to episode 6 of Teal Blue, your fortnightly cybersecurity news podcast focused on important cybersecurity news for Australian organisations. My name is Brad Morgan. I'm the Security Operations Centre Manager at Triskel Labs. And as always, today I'm joined by Richard Granger, the Triskel Labs Global DFIR Lead. Rich, what's on the agenda for today?
It's been a fairly busy news fortnight, Brad. We've got a bit to talk about.
I think that's an understatement. There was more we wanted to cram in here, but especially a big Australian story, and I don't think we've got room for it.
I know there's only so many minutes of the day that we can be recording these.
That's it.
We'll be kicking off with probably one of the largest stories over the last fortnight, which is the LockBit founder being unmasked, which is very interesting. So we'll have a chat about that. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, DFAT, have also put out some publications around warnings of using the Democratic People's Republic of Korea IT workers. So that'll be an interesting chat, I think.
Yeah, that one. Look, that's always in the back of my mind whenever we hire people, right? Whether they're, internal for us or if we help our clients hire contractors. So I think that one's really important that people are having a read of that. And to me, that carries further on out of the update earlier on this year about sleepers and that sort of thing. So really excited to have a crack at that one.
Yep. There's a new government app set to fight against credential misuse. So again, an interesting topic.
Steps in the right direction. Interesting.
Yep. Microsoft have revamped and updated their Secure Future initiative as well. I know you'll be very interested to talk about that one.
Let's see what the future holds, shall we? It's Microsoft. You might have more luck to use something I used last week, landing men on Mars, than trying to fix some of the technical debt that is in that environment. But, they're saying all the right things. So.
Yeah, which actually feeds very nicely into the vulnerability of the fortnight, which is CVE 2024-30040, Windows MSHTML platform security feature bypass vulnerability.
Yes, we will go through that one when we get down to that section. So look, and obviously we'll have the what's happening in the SOC side of things as well. I do just want to say at the top, we're not going to touch MediSecure. So I think there's enough out in the market on that one that we're not going to add any value. So that's why we've chosen not to include that one this week. I mean, I've loved seeing all the back and forth around LockBit over the last couple of months. So look, let's give people an update on what's happened recently, and then we can have a little bit of our discussion as we normally do.
Yep. So all of this sort of unfolded on the 8th of May this year. So a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks or so, where the United States, United Kingdom, and Australia government agencies announced that they have uncovered the leader of the notorious ransomware group LockBit. So, known by the moniker LockBit Sup, I'm probably going to butcher the name here, Dmitry Yurovich Khoroshev has been named as allegedly being the leader of LockBit, and has now been he himself has been named in financial sanctions and travel bans as well by those governments. So what that means? Oh, go on.
Yeah. No, you go. I'm keen to see what your thoughts are initially.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So obviously these sanctions make it a criminal offence to provide assets or payment to Dmitry. Or to use or deal with his assets as well. So second cyber sanction that we've imposed, by we, I mean Australia. The first one was early this year with, again, probably going to butcher the name, Alexander Ermakov, who was allegedly involved in the Medibank attack as well.
Yeah, so look, I mean, it's a tough one, right? There are sanctions against a lot of people in Russia. I would hazard people should not be having people from Russian domains or Russian IPs accessing their environments. To me, that's a massive red flag. The second you have that, so if you haven't already put a block on risky countries around the world, do it for Russia. That's number one. Because when you read into what the sanctions are, there's no proof. You don't have to, there doesn't have to be proof that you've done anything. It's more the proof that you haven't taken the steps to stop them having access to your systems and things like that. So just take the steps and block access to Russia. From Russia. That's what I would be doing there. So
yeah, even outbound stuff as well. Like we see a lot when it comes to data exfiltration. There will be threat actor infrastructure that's hosted in Russia or other parts of Eastern Europe where they're basically sending out the data that they're exfiltrating to them. I mean, if they've always got ways around this as well. I'm sure that it wouldn't be too hard for them to realize that outbound to these countries is being blocked and then spin up a VPS server on Australian soil, a DigitalOcean or something like that. But yeah, it's a good potentially an early. Well, that's if they're exfiltrating. It's not really early warning, but a good indicator.
You're well done at that point.
Yeah, it's a good detection as well. Be like,
why is that happening? It is, and look, I mean, I've got it in with marketing at the moment, being approved a list of minimum recommended access controls conditional access controls for Microsoft, and one of those is a list of high risk countries. Now, it does extend a little bit further beyond where people would think high-risk countries go. The list that I've got here is North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, Syria, Belarus, Vietnam, Pakistan, Turkey, Ukraine, Brazil, Nigeria, Romania, Bulgaria, and South Africa. Now, Vietnam, anyone in the APAC region understands Vietnam, right? Brazil and South Africa. Now, I would not have really thought of them as high risk for cybercrime. I think of them high risk for physical crime. So, this just shows that just because, we don't think of them, or historically we haven't thought of them as a risk, that they are. So the more countries that you put onto these non-approved lists, or better still have an approved list, then it makes it harder for these threat actors to be able to start spinning up that other infrastructure, as you say. So,
yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to touch on here is back to LockBit. What's been reported is that in 22-23, LockBit comprised 18% of total reported Australian ransomware events, which was 119 reported victims in Australia. Now, taking LockBit down is a great step. However, what do you think happens to the affiliates, and does this lead to a bit of a fragmentation of these ransomware gangs that makes it a little bit harder to track them and you start playing whack-a-mole?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, obviously, a couple of weeks ago, we saw some of the LockBit infrastructure being taken down or taken over, but that didn't really deter them. Since this, the naming of LockBit's up, LockBit are still posting victim organizations on their leak sites. So it's kind of interesting to see, they still appear to be active. What we might, potentially might end up in a situation where the affiliates lose trust in LockBit. Perhaps they move to other groups and work as affiliates for them. I mean, that's probably already happening as well. That not necessarily anything tying them to working with one ransomware group. So it might just be that we see, influx of affiliates to different groups, just continuing the same things that they're doing at LockBit, just under a different name.
Yeah, look, I mean, I wouldn't be putting all my eggs in one ransomware basket, so I'd definitely be looking. And once you've had a couple of websites seized by authorities, I'd be running a mile. So yeah, if they're smart, they've probably moved on. I want to talk about DFAT. And yeah, the DPRK IT workers. Can you tell us what they've warned us about?
Yeah, so the Australian Sanctions Office, which is part of DFAT, published an advisory, I think it was about a week ago or so, which is basically just trying to alert Australian community about the fact that there are DPRK workers or DPRK IT workers that are posing as non-DPRK nationals. So I think one of the biggest issues with people from DPRK and potentially hiring them is obviously it's sanctioned, so it's illegal to use them. So what these IT workers are doing is essentially pretending to reside in a different country. And I'll sort of take a bit of a quote from the publication from DFAT, and they're saying the DPRK has dispatched thousands of highly skilled IT workers around the world. The DPRK extensive illicit IT worker operations helps finance the regime's unlawful weapons of mass destruction and ballistic missile program as well.
Yeah, that one, that's getting pretty deep, isn't it? I mean, they're struggling that much. They're sending people out to legitimately earn money, and also, while they're there, they're going to compromise the organisations as well, right? That's the definition of an insider threat. If you've got these people and you are welcoming them into your environment, that's straight up. That's an issue. Now, something I picked up is they're talking about contractors and direct employees. So this comes back to third-party risk assessments. If you're employing contractors, make sure you do your due diligence. It's also, if you're employing people, again, do your employment checks. Just because there is a shortage of technical people out there, skilled technical people, does not mean you can bypass whatever your processes are. And if you don't have these processes, you need to make sure you actually put them in place and follow them.
Yeah.
Because the offences are the fines for the offences are huge.
Yes. Individuals up to 10 years in prison or a fine of 2,500 penalty units or $782,000. That's pretty hefty for an individual fine.
Or 3 times the value of the transaction, whichever is greater.
Wow.
Right?
Jeez,
that
okay.
is, yeah. So if you spend $1 million with that individual or as an individual, your transaction's $1 million, then the fine has potential to be $3 million.
Yeah, it's a pretty hefty fine.
For an individual. I don't have that in my back pocket.
No. And it's arguably worse for corporations as well, which is 10,000 penalty units, 3.13 million, or again, 3 times the value of the transaction. So, yeah.
And it is also worth noting those penalty units can be revised. So just because that's what it is at time of publication, those penalty units do get revised. So it is, it's not worth the risk, right? Basic processes, and realistically, how good are they going to be in your environment? They're not going to offer you that much value. I'm sure you can still find resources out there that offer more value than someone from that region. So, anything more on that one, mate?
I might just quickly run through some of the indicators that they published as well. So a lot of this is sort of, I guess, common sense if you're working in the IT field, but them logging in from various IP addresses in a short period of time, money or payments of money through platforms to PRC or People's Republic of China-based bank accounts, or requests for payment in cryptocurrency as well, which would probably be a bit of a red flag. Inconsistencies in the name of in how their names are spelt, where they're claiming their nationality or work location is, and also inability to conduct business during required business hours. So, I mean, it'd probably be a bit of a red flag if someone's saying that they're in Australia, but for some reason they can't work Australian business hours.
Yeah, yeah. Look, and as you said at the top there, a lot of that is common sense for those of
Mm,
us in IT. May not be for people in HR, but I would definitely have a red flag on a number of those when I'm hiring people. So
yeah.
definitely worth keeping that keeping that in mind. And they might not even be linked to DPRK, but if I had a couple of those, I wouldn't proceed with hiring that particular person. This one I think is awesome steps in the right direction, and I think we could see this expand out over time. So this is the new government app that is set to fight credential misuse.
Mm.
So do you want to give us some talking points on this one, mate?
Yeah, so the 5th of May, the government announced an additional $11 million in funding to the already $3.3 million funding that was established for essentially a mobile app and secure website that will allow Australians to, quote, protect their identity. So this has already sort of been already in discussion by the government and what they're planning on doing. And essentially, it's going to be a register that enables people that have had their personal details stolen to quickly lock down their information to prevent it from being used for identity crime and theft as well.
Yeah, so I had a look into this because I'll be perfectly upfront. I had not heard about this. I've been lucky enough to dodge Optus and Medibank and a few others recently, and it's pretty cool. It looks like it is predominantly Australian government organisations at this point in time that it will lock down those different ID forms for you and that sort of thing. But I think it's an absolutely brilliant idea, and I'm more than happy to see this coming in. And one of the things I picked up from the actual idmatch.gov.au website was at 14 October 2022, the register included 100,000 Australian passports. So the passports can still be used for international travel. So they've obviously been caught up at some point in time, but they're still valid enough to be able to travel with. So I think it's brilliant. The app itself, or sorry, the web app website is called idmatch.gov.au. I highly recommend people go and check it out because I think it's going to be critically important as we see more and more leaks out there.
Mm.
So, and it's got links to all the appropriate government departments and that sort of thing. So, I guess on that one, I would love to see possibly, and this is tying into something we discussed previously around financial organizations and things like that. How would this hook into financial services in the future? Or do you think it would be a good idea if this had the ability to hook into people's bank accounts, if it was on an opt-in basis?
Yeah, I that's like when I was looking into this particular story, that was one of the questions I had is how is this going to work? Like, is this just going to be the government set up their own have I been pwned.com, and if someone pops up in there, you get a notification saying your LinkedIn password's been compromised or something like that. Is it going to be hooked into credit monitoring services? So if someone tries to take out a line of credit in your name, are you going to be notified immediately and then provided with the steps on how to remediate it? I'm very keen to understand more of the technical details about how they're envisioning this working. I agree. I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. But yeah, keen to get to the nitty gritty, I guess, of how it's going to work.
Yeah, look, I agree. And one of the things I picked out on here were on their site was if you have been a victim of identity compromise, they're still referring you to ID Care and
Yeah.
other places. So I don't think it's going to go to that level yet. I think it's more if they're detecting unusual activity to do with your identity documents, your Medicare card, government issued identity documents, passport, Medicare card, MyGov, your tax file numbers and that sort of thing. But I think it definitely then, once they perfect that, I would have zero issue in maybe extending that out beyond that and into, AFCX, or Australian Financial Crimes Exchange, and a few others that we mentioned previously, to really bring those two different things together and try and protect people, because that does then get us to that point that we mentioned last episode, about being one of the most secure countries by 2030. If we can get things like this working, then I think that's really a great step down that path. Look, and talking about improving for the future, let's talk about Microsoft's Secure Future Initiative. And look, I laugh. Microsoft, there's been so much bad over the years, right? There is so much technical debt for people out there, and Azure is just making it so much worse. But at least they've woken up to it, or they've been forced to wake up to it following some pretty nasty things over the last sort of 6 to 8 months. Can you fill us in, please, mate?
Yeah, so the Secure Future Initiative, that was sort of originally launched in November 2023, so last year. And since then, Microsoft, I think it was about a week ago or so, came out saying that due to the rapidly evolving threat landscape, they're basically going to be making security their top priority. So they've expanded the SFI to also include recommendations. So there was a cyber safety review board into the Exchange Online intrusion of the US summer 2023. And then more recently as well, some of our listeners might be familiar with the Midnight Blizzard, or the Russian state-sponsored actor activities within Microsoft as well. So it seems like they're
within Microsoft Corp. Like that is, that was scary.
I think, like, just to sort of touch on that point as well, I think that really kind of highlights that, any organization can get breached. It's Microsoft, they're one of the biggest organizations in the world in security, in everything IT, and they've been breached as well. So
I think it just proves that Azure and Microsoft 365 controls are really, really hard to configure.
Yeah.
It's when they can't get it right themselves. So not saying it was a misconfiguration, but hey, who knows? So sorry, mate, I interrupted you there.
No, you're good. So they've sort of got the three, I guess, principles now, which is secure by design. So making, when you're actually making a product or service, you got security at the forefront of how you're building it. Secure by default. So this is an interesting one where security protections are enabled and enforced by default. No extra effort and are not optional. So one of the things that comes to my mind is MFA being enforced on tenancies in M365, UAL. So they've actually, to give them credit, like they've enforced that now, and that's on by default. But 2 years ago, we were doing business email compromises where UAL is something you had to turn on in the environment, which wasn't great if we were relying on some of those logs in there. And they've also actually more recently extended the UAL logging to, I think it's 180 days by default, which is good.
It is very good, very useful.
And the third principle is secure operations. So security controls and monitoring will continuously be improved to meet current and future threats. So it's not just about sticking, all these things in. You got to actually have someone monitoring them and keeping them updated and adapting them.
Yeah, so I want to touch on a couple of things there. The secure by design. There's been a lot of noise from the White House over the last little while about secure by design and making sure that anything sold into FedGov is secure by design. So I think they were going to have to do this regardless for that one. Secure by default. Well, yeah. I mean, if you have security controls and you are locking them away behind a paywall, you are begging for your customers to get owned and get compromised. I think this is far, far too late for this. And this comes into what I was saying about the technical debt. this should have been something Microsoft were doing 2 years ago. We would be worldwide in a much better position right now had that occurred. And secure operations, I welcome this. Right, the more logging and the more visibility we can get out of those tenancies, the better. It is, this sort of stuff is critical, and we have to have that coming into our environments, because the more we can see, the earlier we can jump onto things.
Yep.
And one of the things I wanted to point out is that they have actually tied executive remuneration to their success around this now as well. So there is a monetary penalty now for execs if they don't meet these targets. So I don't know how much of their remuneration is going to be tied to it, but when you start hitting execs' back pockets, things might start moving a bit quicker.
Yeah.
So
yep.
I welcome it. So
yep.
Look, so you've mentioned the 3 security principles. They also mentioned 6 pillars. So do you want to have a look at those?
Yep, I'll run through those. So it's first up, we've got protect identities and secrets. Obviously, yeah, that's a no-brainer. Protect tenants and isolate production systems. That's I think that's good. Yeah, that I kind of we see a lot of the time where everything can talk to everything, and lateral movement's very easy. So isolating systems is a good idea. Protecting networks. Protect engineering systems, monitor and detect threats, and then the last pillar is accelerate response and remediation as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, they all make sense to me, and I'm excited to see it. And look, yeah, I mean, the protect identities and secrets for me is pretty good. One of the key takeaways here, a couple, were ensure 100% of user accounts are protected with securely managed phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. Now, if that is 100% of all user accounts within Microsoft users, and I'm talking about Live, I'm talking about Hotmail, I'm talking about those of us with M365 Azure accounts, all of that sort of thing. If that is everyone, that's massive. The individual user count for Microsoft is absolutely huge. So if that's going down to that level, brilliant. I still have, and I am old, I still have an old school Hotmail account, right? And I have set up a lot of authentication around that, and I've got push and all that sort of thing coming to me within that. But I doubt many people have gone down that route on their personal accounts. So if we can have that across personal and business, awesome. Ensure 100% of applications are protected with system managed credentials, for example, managed identity and managed certificates. Again, awesome. If they can do this, it is going to bring down the amount of BECs that we're starting to see through those methods as well. Yeah. And ensure 100% of identity tokens are protected with stateful and durable validation. I mean, it's brilliant. I welcome it. I'd love to go into the others, but I don't think we've got enough time to go through them all.
We'll have a link to that in the show notes for everyone to have a little read.
Yeah, I recommend people have a read. It is well worth the read, and it's well worth getting to understand, because it will also give you some ideas of what you can do right now to improve the security of your tenancies as well. So that is important. And further on to that, as I said, we'll be pushing out our minimum recommended conditional access policies. And while I was researching that, I did see one that was you can actually destroy sessions for users in high-risk locations. So if you've got users in high-risk locations, you can make them re-MFA if you wanted to every hour. And if they don't, it destroys their session. So that's awesome, right? I love that idea. So, there are things that you can do now to be able to get further ahead of that. While we're at it, let's talk about CVE 2024-30040, Windows MSHTML platform security feature bypass vulnerability.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
It is, and I'm going to be completely honest, I have not had time to read into this. I've had much other stuff going on, so I'm going to rely on you for this one, mate.
Yeah, that's all right. I can give a quick overview. But essentially, it's, as the name suggests, a security feature bypass vulnerability in MSHTML engine within Microsoft Windows, allegedly being exploited in the wild as a 0-day. It has been assigned a CVSS score of 8.8 and rated as important. And I guess the potential exploitation of this particular one is what it could do is allow a threat actor to exploit it by using social engineering. So it might be, a phishing email or social media or instant messaging or something like that to convince the target to open a specially crafted document. Once that's exploited, that could allow a threat actor to execute code on that target system. So yeah, it could sort of end up being quite nasty if the social engineering was successful and you can get someone to click on something and then it will go through and execute whatever they've crafted into that payload.
Yeah, it's it's just another day, another one of these sorts of things, isn't it? So, but on the plus side, it's not a perimeter vulnerability, which is awesome, unless you've got exposed servers, which I know is something you want to touch on. What does this highlight as a learning, I guess?
Yeah, so like we're always banging on. I'm probably sure we could find it in all of the last 5 episodes where we talk about perimeter device security and making sure it's being patched. But you can have a really secure perimeter, and it just takes one something to get threat actor to get into the environment, and then they're past. They're already in the network now. So you need to make sure that everything internally is up to date as well. You can't forget about the internal systems, the Windows servers, even user workstations. We've seen it in plenty of ransomware engagements where threat actors have gotten in and then they're exploiting vulnerabilities that are on internal Windows hosts. So zero logon, like that's a 2020 vulnerability, but we're seeing that in ransomware attacks in 2024. A Black Basta engagement we had, they successfully phished their way onto initial access on a user's workstation, and then they used an event viewer UAC bypass exploit from GitHub to get local admin creds on that machine that allowed them to then progress further in the attack. So yeah, it's you can't forget about everything else internally just because you've got a secure outer perimeter. You need to make sure that these things are being patched as well.
That's it. And I mean, when we issue our SOC reports, we depending on the services the client's got, we look at external and internal risk ratings, and we do recommend that they try to get them both reducing. I've seen some organisations that have come to us and gone, our perimeter's awesome. I'm like, excellent. What are you doing for internal vulnerability scanning? Oh no, everything's great on the perimeter. I'm like, yeah, but okay, let's run a vulnerability scan. And we have a look, and exactly what you've just said, right? If a threat actor got onto the right machine there, they're in a world of pain. So it's okay to have that fortress type mentality, or the other way of looking at it is a watermelon, green on the outside, red on the inside. But you need to start getting that red moving towards green on the internal as well. And having that secure external layer, it buys you some time to be able to prioritize your internal as well. But yeah, you definitely can't forget it. Let's touch on what we've been seeing in the SOC, and I know what we're going to say. Session token theft. Who would have thought? Is still, and it's getting worse. It's becoming more and more frequent. How often we're seeing this, and the other good old MFA bypass, which is just sending push notifications and hoping that someone hits yes.
Yep. So. Yeah, it's why number matching's very important. I think, again, we were talking about Microsoft before. I think that's one of the things that they have enforced or are enforcing. It's the number matching, which is a good step to stop that. I think they call it push notification fatigue or MFA fatigue.
MFA fatigue, and I think that's what they're calling their phishing resistant multi-factor authentication.
Yeah. So that's still saying that. I think that's going to be pretty consistent. What we're seeing each fortnight with these episodes.
Look, it makes me wake up every time I have to authenticate to something. I have to. So I'm running an Android through our device management policies. TL have got policies on my phone, which is fine. I work in security, and I want my phone to be able to be wiped if it needs to be. And for me to be able to see that push notification, I have to biometrically authenticate into it just to open the app. I then have to hit yes, enter the code, and then it asks my fingerprint again. So I'm biometrically proving it's myself twice, and it is making me stop and think, did I actually do this? Which, when you're looking at the number on the screen, of course you are. So it is a brilliant method, and I highly recommend organizations look at adopting that one as they move forward. The other one you've got here is hard-coded keys in code.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to say 1998 called, and they want their code back.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But we are still sort of seeing AWS keys and things like that hard-coded into applications, which obviously is a pretty good vector for a threat actor if they're able to get their hands on it. It's always a good idea to not hard code anything in terms of like credentials or secrets that if you can get away with it. It's worthwhile just continually doing a bit of a review on what's in your code and making sure that none of that's there.
Yeah, and if you're new to cyber or you're new to coding or anything like that, just because you see other people do it doesn't mean it's acceptable. I watched some videos that my son's been watching recently about how to automate the boring stuff and start playing with Python and PowerShell and all that sort of thing. And on a number of the videos, they are basically showing you to put creds in clear text into your scripts to go out onto the internet and authenticate to a website and do something. And it triggered me. It really did. So, you're teaching, these guys that are recommending people do this to learn coding are teaching bad practices from day one. So just keep that in mind, guys. If you are putting creds or, keys or something into your scripts, it's bad practice and it needs to stop. There are other ways around it.
Yeah.
So, cool. Okay, well, that's it for this episode. Richard, thank you very much. And the audience, thank you for joining us again this fortnight. And as always, if you've got any feedback, feel free to reach out to us at tealblue@triskelabs.com or just leave us a message on LinkedIn. If you want to reach out privately, you can. Our LinkedIn's are pretty open. So, thank you very much for your time.
Yep. Thanks all for tuning in.